So, Libertarian comedian Dave Smith completely destroyed so-called centrist right-wing comedian Konstantin Kisin from Triggernometry. And you really see why Kisin focuses on interviews and not debates, because he's not very good at it. Let's get straight into the video.
Israeli military to achieve the military objective, while also sort of claiming that he's not involved and kind of at that time getting away with it.
If he now gets involved, as the jungle drums seem to be suggesting, that is a massive moment for Donald Trump, I would say. I mean, you could argue that is the most important decision he will have taken as a president, and maybe the most important decision he ever takes. If he actually starts bombing with American forces Iran, that is a massive thing to be doing. Do you think it's, as Tucker Carlson says, something that could imperil his presidency?
We are in the unknown, so nobody knows how this is going to play out. I think we should all be honest about that and be fair. What I think it really fundamentally depends on is what you mean by the word involved. If you mean that America is going to help Israel shoot down ballistic...
That's such a non-point, isn't it? Unknowns. No, there will be predictions you can make. Right, okay. If Iran does have potential nuclear capabilities, will this incentivize them to continue on that path? If they are on that path, again, there's no evidence of that, but will it make them, ironically? What is the response going to be of surrounding countries that don't like Israel? I mean, there's so many questions. Just to say it's unknown, and then, it's insane.
Missiles. I don't know that that will be such a major decision or will be seen as
Well, let me
such.
paint a picture where they use a B-52 bomber and they drop one of these buster bombs to try and...
So it's an unknown to not a big decision.
Get to the nuclear sites that the Israelis can't get to because they haven't got that technology. If they were to do that, in other words, directly use American forces to do the bombing, would your calculation about Trump change?
These are all hypotheticals, because the one thing that I do know...
Which is what you need to consider if you're going to invade a country, bomb a country, and potentially escalate something that could really have massive implications for the geopolitical Middle East. Like, this is the problem. Donald Trump doesn't think long term. He thinks, I mean, not even to tomorrow. He thinks on a daily basis. Like, all of a sudden, he wasn't going to, help Israel attack Iran. And then he is. Is he going to change his mind again? Like, you can't really run a government like this. This isn't something you do on a whim, go to war. It's insane.
And I think Dave will tell you this himself, is the thing that people in the United States, from talking to people there, are most concerned about is any sort of boots on the ground scenario. They do not want American soldiers in the Middle East. I think they're right not to. I genuinely think that. And so fundamentally, it really depends on what happens and the way that it happens. And you're right, it is a big decision.
Wow, big brain point there.
But I think it's, all this stuff, I mean, Dave's calling for President Trump to be impeached over this, when this is something that he promised the American people 30 to 40 times on the campaign trail.
Well, okay,
doesn't make any sense.
But on that, I would clarify that. He said that number of times that Iran...
But also, he said he would be the no-war president. He said, no wars, October 7th wouldn't happen under me, Putin wouldn't have invaded Ukraine under me, and then we have a potential war. Like, cognitive dissonance.
Iran should not be allowed to have a nuclear bomb. That is indisputable. He also has consistently portrayed himself as a man who wants peace, not war. I'm going to solve the problem in Ukraine, solve the Middle East, and so on. This would go against all of his claims to be that person. And, of course, the big debate behind all this is that Tulsi Gabbard, his own Director of National Intelligence, the IAEA director last night, they both said in very recent times, including 24 hours ago, in the case of the Atomic Agency, that there is no evidence that they've seen that Iran is anywhere near progressing to an actual nuclear weapon.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key point of this.
So I like Tulsi Gabbard. We've had her on Triggernometry. I think she's a great human being, which is why I did her the courtesy of watching the full clip of her testimony that she gave. And what she says in that testimony is that Iran is not pursuing the nuclear weapons program, but what Iran is doing is enriching uranium to 60% and beyond, which is a clear indication of their desire either to actually make nuclear weapons or to move much, much closer to a position to be able to make them. As I think Dave would concede from all the nuclear scientists, what they're saying is you need about 3 to 5% enriched uranium for civilian purposes. They are now enriching uranium to 60%. And by the way, this is also in the IAEA report, and no one's talking about this. They're using their 20% uranium to make 60% uranium, which is, again, an indicator of the fact that they're moving either towards attempting to make nuclear weapons at some point or to be in a position to do so. And that is the threat. And there is no other reason for them to be doing that. So, yes, they don't have the exact bomb ready.
No other reason. Maybe the fact that Israel's got nuclear capabilities that they haven't declared. Officially, they don't exist. So maybe if Iran doesn't officially declare them, they don't exist.
To go, but they're moving in that direction, and Israel is in a position to deal with that threat for the first time in a very long time, and I understand why they're doing it.
Okay, Dave, before...
Okay, so surely by that logic, if you're consistent in your values, which he's not, but Iran should have one then, because of the threat of Israel, who have started to bomb Iran. Okay, no? Okay.
we get to your response to that, just explain to people why you have called what Donald Trump is doing a betrayal and why you think he should be impeached.
Well, I think he has brought us into a war with Iran. Now, how much this war escalates, we will see. And I think that this is it is the most profoundly risky and reckless policy he could have pursued, or just about. I think this is very likely going to lead to a catastrophe, much like all of the other terror wars, including the one, Pierce, that you heroically led the opposition in the UK to in 2003, of course, referring to the war in Iraq. And as you remember well, Pierce, from that war, the justifications just kept constantly changing. And then when one fell away, they'd move to the next one. Oh, he was in on 9/11. Okay, he wasn't in on 9/11. But he's got weapons of mass destruction. Okay, he doesn't have weapons of mass destruction, but we have to liberate the people or bring democracy. And I've already seen that it's remarkable how sped up it is. I've already seen so many of the war hawks bouncing back and forth between all of these different justifications. But of course, in the end there, all of the justifications failed. Not only did he not have weapons of mass destruction, not only was he not in on 9/11, but we also didn't liberate the people. The worst thing that ever happened to the people of Iraq was George W. Bush's war there. And as far as Iran enriching up to 60%, yes, it's true that they only need, I think, between 3 to 5% for civilian nuclear purposes, and maybe some like around 20 to 25% for some medical needs. But that is what is known as a latent nuclear deterrent. There is another reason why they would have that. They want to demonstrate that they can get the bomb, but they don't have it right now to stop something like this happening. But the bottom line is that since 2007, our CIA...
Why is he smiling at that? Like, if you've got a country, antagonistic country near you that has pretty, well-established, huge nuclear armaments funded by America, why wouldn't you? It's just, like, put yourself in Iran's position. Like, of course they are. The threats in the same way Israel sees Iran as a threat. Like, such a double standard.
Has said they're not, they don't have nuclear weapons, and they're not striving to achieve them. Tulsi Gabbard, not only in her testimony, but in the Director of National Intelligence as her capacity serving that role, in the annual threat assessment just put out a couple months ago, reaffirmed the same thing. And so is the global community. Iran has been willing to negotiate this entire time. And maybe the negotiations haven't been successful, but even Benjamin Netanyahu, in his interview with Brett Baer the other day, couldn't even manage to lie and say that they've broken out and they're pursuing. He said maybe a year. The same thing he's been saying since I was 7 years old, lying over and over and over again because he wants a regime change war here. And he's
And yeah, that's the nail on the head. Netanyahu wants a forever war because he's a fascist, and that's it. So he slaughtered Gaza, genocide in Gaza. What next? Oh, again, let's go for Iran, topple the regime, and I don't have to go to prison. I don't have to be held accountable for my actions. That's it. And they'll have any pretext. Like, oh, they've got the nuclear now. What next? This is how fascists work.
said this in his own words, and so have all of the neoconservatives. Look, right here on your show, Piers, which I think might be the most fascinating moment in the history of Uncensored, when General Wesley Clark reaffirmed that not only had he seen the plans to overthrow 7 countries in 5 years, but that it went all the way back to the early 90s, and that it was revived, in his words, in a study paid for by the Israelis. They've gotten the 6 other ones. This is the 7th one. This war is not about nukes that Iran doesn't have. And just one more point I would make, as the great Scott Horton said the other day. Look, I mean, even if they were developing nukes, which they're not, Truman knew that the Soviets were developing nukes. He didn't launch an aggressive war against them for it. And Johnson knew that Mao Zedong was developing nukes. He still didn't launch an aggressive war against the country. And the point is that you could sit here and say, just like they did with Muammar Gaddafi in Libya, you could sit here and say, no, we're just going to have a no-fly zone. We won't have boots on the ground. We won't have this. Look, Iran has already demonstrated, in a few days that this war has been going on, that they're more capable than all of the other countries we picked on in the terror wars. They've already hit Israel and killed people there. What's going to happen when a few Americans get killed? Hopefully this doesn't, but what's going to happen if that happens? What do you think Donald Trump's going to do?
Yeah, but you've got to realize 7 years ago, Trump hadn't nearly had a deal. Barack Obama came to a deal. So they're acting like, oh, just bomb them. No, you need to negotiate. You need to come to a deal, because bombing Iran will not solve the issue. If your real intention is to stop them getting nuclear armaments, that's not going to help. But it's not about that. It's about a forever war. It's about potentially toppling the Iranian regime and Netanyahu continuing his cycle so he's not held accountable. It's really that simple. That's how fascists operate. See you in the next video.